not ready yet.
We have looked at a bunch of units from the building, and we probably
Yeah, but okay, I can go right there.
And they said it's 150 floors that had been renovated.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a little small for you to be this
And
too.
it wasn't particularly And the second floor was too low. So we said, well, you know, have an 18 unit that was available that's higher or lower. And then a few months later, we became a fourth floor.
How long have you been there?
It'll be 3 years in March. It was right before the lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Like 2 days before the lockdown.
You should come
We
around.
owned it, we bought it right before they started building the school lines. We said, oh, prices are probably gonna go up downtown, midtown, so let's buy it now. We rented it out for 3.5, 4 years.
For like spread.
And then it took
No,
about
to cut.
4 months to do the renovation.
Oh, what do you mean you have to?
We rented it to a tenant.
Oh,
There was a
when you
tenant in
finally,
there.
if you owned it,
Yeah, we
rented it,
owned
owned
it.
it.
Yeah, we owned it for about, come on, 4 or 5 years before we.
And we still get mail from people we haven't even heard of. I mean, they were out years and years before anybody we knew. But yeah, you know, if you wanna come over and take a look inside the building, we can show you around. If you're coming to the Van Gogh exhibit,
It's the,
Oh, we were dating?
Yeah.
um,
It's right across from the DIA.
really, great, yeah, it's where the, Chartreuse restaurant is and,
yeah.
oh, and that, and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, that would be the.
Preparation of your
And the
talk,
park
you
service
your
is
cell
over the
phone.
performance space.
Yeah, no, actually,
They just opened this little performance
Oh,
space.
yeah.
What is that?
Jazz concert.
those are the detailed election results from Israel.
Okay, I was talking about Nevada, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, so have you seen what happened in Nevada? It's,
No, I haven't.
yeah, it's a dead heat at the moment. So
I know that much.
I don't know that when we're gonna know. It's looking good though, because it's been creeping closer and closer.
Yeah, exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll have to check, yeah, before you start talking.
That's right, well, I'll do that right now. Although I can't figure out how to
But they're doing
get
Noel
this
right again.
properly saved.
Did you screenshot?
This is, my smartphone and I are not on good terms with each other.
Yeah, well, we thought about where we wanted to retire, and we didn't want to go to Arizona or Florida, and we didn't want to go out to one of these places where you have to get your car and drive 3/4 of a mile to go to the grocery store. And even though there are some very nice communities out there, it's just too suburban, and we're not golfers, and we're not swimmers. So we really like the urban environment, so. And we said, we want to be somewhere where public transportation such as it is exists, in case we, can't drive anymore. So we're right on the queue line. We had looked at a nice townhouse on Ferry, but then we decided it was too far. It was like 3.5 blocks from anywhere. Temple for a whole
Take
day.
your
We're not
time.
gonna be able to make it to the pipeline. It's a great location.
I think it'll real well, I think after. There's some real nice location if you want to get rid of it.
Oh, that's
Okay, so
We're
we're
not
not,
relieved.
the camera is on, just so you know, but, okay, well, I'm just waiting for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just wanted to tell that we're not moving. Yeah. Well, yeah, we gotta see where the kids end up, you know.
One is law enforcement, medical residence. Every step of the way in which he, started medical school and went for the residencies. She wanted to go out of state, but she ended up staying for very good reason. And so now she's she's an open Miami resident at Bowman. Thinking about going somewhere else, out of state, or some practice that say, we're ready to retire and do our goals.
Sit tight.
Maybe I'll leave her here. The other
Yeah,
one's
we
in
talked
Boston.
about retirement too.
Few months
He just
ago.
wanted to be on the same first.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's probably just as well that you did.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like
it's
it
hard.
wouldn't have been.
If you move with your kids.
I thought, Mitch McConnell was asked what his reaction was to the election. His response was, I don't deal in feelings.
That's got me out the field that says, yeah, they actually want you to.
Anything.
I'm used to this guy.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter.
But it's kind of our experience, it's finally starting to be what we thought it would be when we
Normally.
envisioned that here, we don't. But, you know, the stores were in open, our houses started being all like Zoom and everything. Meet people.
Right, only after I would
Where were you coming from?
Part he's home.
Yeah, now it's just like the queue line, the restaurant back open, the restaurants. Some kind of white out like that. The Detroit Home Theater reopened.
But
Oh, my shit. Post that on Facebook.
So, yeah,
Well, she could come next week, I think, because they're having.
The one thing.
Well, where
I
I
would-
the boat.
is,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is one of those things, sometimes you're out in the, you're out in like, Traverse City or something, or whatever, and you think, oh, this is great, you know? And then you're out, but every out of the place just seems like it's the same place.
Yeah.
I'm visiting my sisters in, Boca Raton, she's a snowbird now. Stay with her. It's real nice. Well, we come downtown, we think, it's real nice.
Yeah.
But I think I would be more conservative person. I just like to walk, I like to have destinations.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Climbed in hell, southern Colorado, walk from traffic, 14th Park Church.
We talked about, yeah, yeah, and I've been back here since I'm going to, very
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Carol Weisfeld from the Reconstructionist Congregation of Detroit, and it's so nice to be here this morning to have a joint service with the downtown synagogue and other people who are joining us this morning as well. What I would like to do first is just go around the room briefly and ask everybody to say your name and say where you're from. So could we start please with Stephanie and Tony?
I'm Tony Dilloff, privileged to introduce my wife Stephanie, and we live up the street at Lafayette Park.
And we're RCD members.
My name is Jasmine Dumitru. I'm a student from UDM and I'm from Livonia, Michigan.
I'm Victoria Bartholomew. I'm also a student at Detroit Mercy, and I'm from Muskegon.
I'm Nicholas. I'm also from UDM, and I'm also from Livonia.
Rod Roth from RCD and Lafayette Park.
Sheila Hughes from RCD and from Wyandotte.
Ariana Silverman. I have the privilege of serving as the rabbi of the downtown synagogue and I live in Detroit.
I'm Alan Shank from RCD, and I live in Lafayette Park.
Rachel Rudman. I'm the executive director of the downtown synagogue and I live in Huntington Woods.
Alex Selsley, IADS, and I live in Hazel Park.
I'm Melvin, the downtown synagogue, and I live in Southwest Detroit.
I'm Joe Lewis, and I live in Detroit too.
And I'm Bobby Lewis, we're with the Downtown Synagogue, we live in the Park Shelton next to the Art Institute.
Cheryl Berlin from Farmington Hills. Not with, I'm just here.
Arnie Berlin.
And I'm Phil Newman, I also live in Farmington Hills, and I'm on the board of the Downtown Synagogue.
It's so good to be together with everyone this morning. We're going to have a service using our Reconstructionist Siddur. So I hope everyone has gotten a prayer book. There should be, you should have a service outline as well to help you know what page we're on, and there are more copies of that on the table in the back. We're going to have a traditional Torah service. I understand that Rabbi Ariana will manage that for us, and then Malcolm is going to be our Torah reader this morning. We're so grateful for your help with that. After the Torah service, Brad Roth, who is a professor at Wayne State in law and political science, is going to give us his observations on the recent elections in both Israel and the U.S. And we'll have a brief discussion about that. So that's sort of a special feature with today's service. We'll have a simple kiddush afterwards as well. If anyone needs bathrooms, the ladies' room is all the way down the hall towards the end. The men's room is down that short hallway on the left, both on this floor. Okay? So we'll go ahead with the service, and Rabbi Ariana, could you lead us in the blessing?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'tatef b'tzitzit.
Amen.
The morning blessings begin on page 152. And our tradition is to do the morning blessings as members of the congregation. So take your turn whenever you wish, or don't take a turn in Hebrew or in English. And please do it slowly, observing your breath as we make this transition from the busyness of the weekends and driving here and finding a place to being in a place of prayer. So we'll do this slowly and mindfully. Blessed are you, Awakener, our God, life of all the worlds, who removes sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids.
Blessed are you, the provident, our God, life of all the worlds, who gives the bird of dawn discernment to tell day from night.
Blessed are you, the fashioner, our God, life of all the worlds, who stretches forth the earth upon the waters.
Blessed are you, the Lamb, our God, life of all the world, who makes the blind to see.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolamim malbish arumim.
Blessed are you, redeeming one, our God, life of all the worlds, who makes the captive free.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolamim zokef kefufim.
Blessed are you, the way, our God, life of all the worlds, who makes firm a person's steps.
Blessed are you, the generous, our God, life of all the worlds, who acts for all my needs.
Blessed are you, the mighty one, our God, life of all the worlds, who girds Israel with strength.
Blessed are you, the beautiful, our God, life of all the worlds, who crowns Israel with splendor.
Blessed are you, the imageless, our God, life of all the worlds, who made thee in your image.
Blessed are you, who free, our God, life of all the worlds, who made me free.
Blessed are you, the Ancient One, our God, life of all the worlds, who made me of the people Israel.
Blessed are you, renewing one, our God, life of all the worlds, who gives strength to the weary.
And let's read the last blessing together. Blessed are you, the architect, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, who shaped the human being with wisdom, making for us all the openings and vessels of God. It is revealed and known before your throne of glory that one of these passageways be opened when it should be closed, or locked up when it should be free. One could not stay alive or stand before you. Blessed are you, miraculous, the wondrous healer of all flesh. And on page 775, would someone please read the first reading on peace at the top of page 775.
Shalom is one of the many names by which God is known in Judaism. It is the name by which God will bless you if you dedicate yourselves to each other in accordance with the divine will. The name Shalom embraces everything that is calculated to render life happy, useful, and holy. It denotes, in the first place, love. Love that is binding and everlasting. Love that does not fade with the flowers or pass with the sunshine. Shalom is the peace that is secured when we have done our share toward our companions, whenever we bring light into hearts that are dark with despair, and cheer into souls overcast with gloom. No language possesses a word that so accurately describes the serenity of the soul, which we experience whenever we have thus made God's presence real to men and women. By seeking to promote the happiness of your neighbor, by engaging in every effort to be of help to your companion, and by emphasizing that aspect of life that we call holy, you will realize the full blessing of love and peace, the blessing of Shalom.
Next, I want to read a poem by Danny Siegel, which is actually on one of our pieces of artwork here. And I tried to find it online so that I could print it out, but apparently it's in a book, and I couldn't get free access to it. The artwork was done by Elizabeth Sokolow, who is a poet and artist who was a member of our first of Tekiah and then of RCE for many years. So I'm just going to read it from the wall. I apologize for the awkwardness here. It's from his modern Psalms, Psalm 55, adapted. Happy are we whose synagogue is small, because we love each Jew, because we have to, because we do. Happy are our children who sit in 6s and 4s with the teacher, learning the Torah, for she knows them enough to know them. Happy are our homemade caterings, our hospitality on Pesach, our own washed floors. Happy the men or women or children who walk in day or night to meditate and sit in peace. Happy are we whose house is a shul and whose temple is a home. And there's another reading about Jews around the world on page 779. Would somebody please read this?
There were women who sat in the market selling beets and cabbages so their men could study. They were Jews. There were men of Yemen, great swordsmen, guards of the king. They were Jews. There are dark women from India wearing saris, black farmers from Ethiopia, children with slanted eyes, all Jews. There are dressmakers and sculptors, thieves and philanthropists, scholars and nurses, beggars and generals. There are women who follow every rule of kashrut and men who know none of the rules. Yet, all of us are Jews. Though we are not alike in mind or body, somewhere in the depths of our souls we know we are the children of one people. We share a history, a hope, and some prayers. We speak many languages. We have heard one voice. All of us stood together at Sinai when our past and our future exploded in thunder and flame before us.
Now on page 230 and 231, we'll do an abbreviated version of the Hallelujah, just the last 4 lines. In English, ring out for Yah with cymbals that resound, clang out for Yah with cymbals that rebound. Let every living thing Yah's praises sing, hallelujah. Let every living thing Yah's praises sing, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 Betzion Tzalei Shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, Betzion Tzalei Trua, Kol Hanshama, Kol Hanshama, Kol Hanshama, Kol Hanshama, Kol Hanshama, Tev Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Kol Hanshama, Tev Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Alan, could you please lead us?
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabba v'yamad divra tirkei v'yanlich malchutei v'chayechonu v'yamechonu v'chayedachal beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kori v'yimru amen v'yehei shmei rabba le'olam le'olam haya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yikroman v'yitnaseh v'yidadar v'yidalei v'yidalal shmei d'kudshah v'riku le'ela min kol birchata v'shivata Tushvachata v'nechamata, Damiram bi'alma b'imru, amen. And the Baruchu, please rise. Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach, Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzero u'vorei choshech, oseh shalom u'vorei et hakol.
Page 277. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol yotecha. La, 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 la. Ya, la, 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 la. Ya, la, 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 la. La, 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 la. Ya, la, 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 la. be seated. And please turn to page 278. And as we read this selection, let's keep in mind all those who serve in the military, everyone who is working to maintain peace or to create peace in our world as we observe this Veterans Day weekend. It came to pass, and will again, that if you truly listen to the voice of the Eternal One your God, being sure to do whatever has been asked of you today.
The one your God will make of you a model for all the nations of the earth, and there will come upon you all these blessings as you listen to the call of the Abundant One, your God.
Blessed be you in the city, blessed be you upon the field.
Blessed be the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your land, the fruit of your cattle, the calving of your oxen, and the lambing of your sheep.
Blessed be your basket and your kneading trough. Blessed be you when you come home, and blessed be you when you go forth.
See, I have placed in front of you today both life and good, both death and ill, commanding you today to love the boundless one your God, to walk in ways I have ordained. Keeping the commandments, laws, and judgments, so that you survive and multiply.
The bountiful, your God, will bless you on the land you are about to enter and inherit. But if you should turn away, and you not heed, and go astray, and you submit to other gods and serve them,
I declare to you today that you shall be destroyed completely. You shall not live out a great expanse of days upon the land that you now cross the Jordan to possess.
I call as witnesses concerning you both heaven and earth, both life and death, that I have placed in front of you a blessing and a curse. Choose life that you may live, you and your seed.
On page 290, give praises to the highest God. Blessed is God, the one to bless. So Moses, Miriam, and the Israelites came forth with song to you in boundless happiness, and they all cried, Mi kamo A new song did the redeemed ones sing out to your name beside the sea. Together all of them gave thanks, declared your sovereignty, and said, Adonai Yimok Le'olam Vaed, Sur Yisrael, U'ma'aveh Yisrat Yisrael, U'te'echu Mecha, Yehuda Yisrael, Go Aleinu, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Yisrael. Alan, could you please lead us in Anita? Page 292.
Your God opened the blocked passageways to you, the congealed places. Roll away the heaven stone from the well, as your servant Jacob did when he beheld his beloved Rachel. Help us open the doors of trust that have been jammed with hurt and rejection. As you open the blossoms in spring, even as you open the heavens in storm, open us to feel your great, awesome, wonderful presence. Please rise, those that can. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Velohe Avotenu, Vimotenu, Elohe Abraham, Elohe Sarah, Elohe Yitzchak, Elohe Rivka, Elohe Yaakov, Elohe Rachel, Elohe Leah, El HaGadol HaGibor VaHanorah, El Elyon, Kol Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol, Erchas De'avot V'imo, U'mevi Kula Livnei V'neihem, L'man Shmo V'yamava, Melech Ozer Moshiach Mokim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Yisrael Serah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Rav Lo Shia, Hashiv HaRuach U'morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chayim B'chesed, Mechaye Kol Chai B'rachamim Rabim, Somei Noflim Rofei Olim, U'matir Asurim, U'mekayem Emunato, L'shenei Afar, Mitvamocha Bal Gevurot, U'midam Elach, Melech Megiddo Chayei, U'matzmiach Tishua, V'ne'eman Atah L'chayot Kol Chai, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayei Kol Chai. Page 303. Mekadesh Hashem Echad, Be'alam Kashem Shemakdishim Oto B'Shmo Morom, Kakatuv Al Yad Neviyecha, V'Kora Zel Zeh V'Yamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavot, Lo Haaretz K'vodo. As V'Kol Ra Gadol Adir, V'Tzaselah K'Kol, Naman, Srasim Elohim, Baruch Yomebro, Baruch Kavod Adonai, V'Yimkomo. Continue with the Amidah silently.
sing together on page 307. Veshamru B'nai Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasot et HaShabbat L'dorotam Berit Olam Veshamru B'nai Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasot et HaShabbat L'dorotam Berit Olam B'ni u'b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Oti le'olam V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat L'dorotam Berit Olam
Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat L'dorotam Berit Olam Vayom hashvi Shabbat v'navash Shabbat v'navash Shabbat v'navash V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat L'dorotam Berit Olam. Now, Rabbi Ariana will lead us in the choir service.
Our Torah service begins this morning on page 383. We have not yet given out the traditional honor of unlocking the ark as a ritual moment. Do you need a ganache? Okay. Would you like one?
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Page 383. Ein kamocha v'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein k'maasecha, v'malchutecha malchut olamim, v'mensholecha dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yorech et amo v'shalom, al ha'olamim, heitiva b'tzoncha et Zion. Tiveho Yerushalayim, Tiveho Yerushalayim, Kiveho levatanu, melech elam v'nisad, Adon olamim. Top of page 385. Vayehi Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, Kumah Gadol Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonai Kadosh Shemo Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonai Kadosh Shemo Adonai Hagedula Hagedula Hatiferet Lehanetzach Beharo Kikol Hashamayim U'aretz Kikol Hashamayim U'aretz Adonai Malach Tamid Na'aseh L'kol Romemu 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 Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'ishtachavu Romemu 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 Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Ve'ishtachavu Please be seated.
Do you want this flat?
Woohoo! It's beautiful. Our Torah reading this morning comes from Parshat Vayera. It begins in chapter 18, verse 1, and can be found if you have your Chumashim on page 99. I am delighted that we have Melvin Lewis as our Torah reader this morning.
That's the red book you want. So this one.
Okay.
The one you have that one. Sorry, we're all sold out.
God's teaching through the Torah is overflowing and abundant, but our Chumashim are somewhat limited. So I encourage you to share if you can with the person sitting next to you. Or yes, as Bill points out, if you want, it is available on Safaria 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world that you have an internet connection. So it's absolutely amazing if you turn to Genesis 18. What? Yes. It goes the right way, Joe. We go backwards. Okay. We are only doing 3 aliyot this morning, so if you don't get an aliyah, please know it's not because I don't love you, it's because this morning we just don't have enough to do. Okay. That's right, I told everybody else on page 99, didn't I? I didn't memorize that. Yep. You just always put other people first. Okay, our first aliyah this morning is chapter 18, verses 1 through 5, beginning on page 99. And Carol, as our wonderful service leader, would you like to have an aliyah?
Okay, you can remind me what the blessing.
Oh, she wrote it down for me. She's very helpful. They are on page 399. Ta'amod. Leah. Abraham Avinu Rishonah. We are starting right there.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher karvanu lavodato v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayera Elav Adonai ve'elenei mamre ve'hu yoshev b'tacha ohel kechom hayom. Vayisa einav vayar v'hinei shalasha anashim nitzavim alav vayar. Vayarot zikratam mipetach ha'ohel vayishtachu artza. Vayomar Adonai inam atati chen be'enecha. Al na ta'avor me'al avdecha yuchachna me'at mayim v'rachatu raglechem hishanu tacha ha'etz ve'echafat lechem v'sa'adu livchem achar ta'avoru ki al kain avartem al avdechem ve'yomeru Kain ta'aseh ka'asher dibarta.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'chokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Joe Lewis. Ya'amod Yosef ben Chaim Batisyahu Halevi.
Baruch hu Adonai Hambarak. Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chavonu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vaymaher Abraham ha'ochela el Sarah vayomer mehari shelo se'im kemach solel lushi v'asi ugod. Al habakarat Abraham vayikach ben bakarach vato vayten el hanahar vaymaher v'asod oto vayichach ema v'chalav ben habakar asher asa vayten miknehem v'hu omed alehem tacha ha'etz vayochelu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chai olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yeshua. Our third aliyah is verses 9 through 14, which begins on page 101. And if she has recovered from the sleep deprivation of the last few weeks, it would be my privilege to invite our downtown synagogue president up for our third aliyah and thank her for her service to the state of Michigan. Ta'amod shir malka bat ben Zion v'mato. Yeah. Woohoo! Shlishi. Thank you.
Baruch hu Adonai Hambarak. Baruch Adonai Hambarak Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher karavanu la'avodato v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayomru elav ayes ara ishtecha. Vayomer hinei va'ohel. Vayomer שוב אשוב אליך כעת חייו, הנה ונשרה אישתך, ושרה שומעת פתח האוהל והוא אחריו. ואברהם ושרה זקנים באים בימים חדל להיות לשרה אורח כנשים, ותצחק שרה בקרבה לאמור, אחרי ולתי הייתה לי עינה ואדוני זקן, ויאמר אדוני אל אברהם, למה זה צחקה שרה לאמור, האפונם אלד ואני זקנתי, היפלט מאדוני דבר כמוה, אשוב אליך כעת חיה ושרה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. אמן. יישר כוח. Nicely done. Indeed. Alan, would you like to have him dust the Torah? I can lift it if you help me dress. Unless someone else would like to lift it, happy to do that. I got that part.
Please write.
V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael ami Adonai b'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Tiva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. You may be seated. Would you like to hold it, or would you like to put it back? Do you, oh, actually, you can put it back. Okay. And is Brad up next? Okay, yes.
It's a real pleasure to be standing here after this last election. So many different things happened. We asked Brad Roth, who's a member of RCD, if he could comment and give us some observations. Brad is professor in both the law school and political science department at Wayne State University. And I had actually never looked at your website until a few days ago. And I was quite impressed with the number of books on democracy and international law that you have either authored or edited along with other people. And so it's a real pleasure to have Brad here today to share his observations. And we'll have a brief discussion if we have time, but we promise it won't go more than 25 minutes because we know people and important things to do. So with that, Brad.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you for that introduction. I brought along the detailed score of the Israeli election just to make sure I wouldn't screw anything up on that. It's a pleasure to be speaking before you today, and particularly a pleasure not to have as bad news as I expected to have when this all started. I think most people are familiar with the current vote counts in the United States, and so no point in belaboring that. I think probably people are a little less up on the details of how the Israeli election came out, and so I thought I would speak to that. It's also worth contextualizing this in with respect to elections that have been taking place around the world in the last several weeks. That the United States has some of the least bad news of these various places, because you see
the trends toward right-wing populism in many parts of the world. Remarkably, Sweden, of course, with a party derived from Nazism, which has a significant role in the current governing arrangement there. A post-fascist party actually leading the government in Italy. Lots of bad news around. The situation in Israel is of a piece with this, and it is remarkably troubling to me from a personal perspective. Having first, my experience with Israel begins really with having spent the summer between my junior and senior year in college at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and having observed Israeli politics from that point forward. And in those days, actually, I got to see Meir Kahane speak, both in Israel and then later in the United States, and to see what a charismatic and dark presence he actually was. And he was always in Israel a marginal figure, and one of the successes of Israeli politics was to keep him on the margins. As you may know, he was subsequently assassinated. But his party went forward in various forms. Its current iteration is part of a coalition known as Religious Zionism, which is a really kind of awful term for what this actually is. It's a union of a kind of what might be the sort of the equivalent of the religious right in the United States in some sense. Mostly backlash against various kinds of cultural developments, and particularly an anti-gay element of that, combined with the successor to the Kahane movement. So Itamar Ben-Gvir is now going to be a critical figure in the new coalition government. This is something that was encouraged by Benjamin Netanyahu, the bringing together of these different forces into this religious Zionism coalition was part of his strategy. He didn't want to see these parties fall beneath the 3.25% threshold. As it turns out, combined, they got about 10.7% of the vote. That leads them to be now the third largest bloc in the Knesset. And so they will be a substantial part of this government. Out of 120 seats, Netanyahu's forces have 64. This is partly a story of wasted votes. It wasn't that Netanyahu's coalition did so much better than last time. It's rather that the way that the votes were allocated with respect to the 3.25% cutoff meant that two disastrous things happened. One of which had to do with the Arab parties. There are 4 Arab parties, or Arab-led parties, in the Knesset. One of them, Balad, the most nationalistic, most Palestinian nationalist of the 4 parties, decided to run alone and not with its previous coalition partners, Hadash and Ta'al. And as a result of that, fell just below 3% of the vote, so all of those votes were wasted. And then, most notably and most grievously, probably from the standpoint of many of us, Meretz, the party that represented the most progressive Zionist element in Israel, fell below the threshold barely. They had got over 3% of the vote, but under 3.25%. And so all of those votes were wasted. There had been an effort for Meretz and the Labor Party to be brought together into one list. For various reasons, this was rejected by the leader of the Labor Party. And so the result was that the two parties split 6.7% of the vote between them. Labor just above the threshold, just around 3.5%, and Meretz falling just below. And so the result of this was that this unwieldy coalition, left, right, and center parties that had opposed Netanyahu ended up losing the election. How much of a joy it would have been for her to have won the election is unclear as well. It's important to recognize how little this formation represents what certainly what I grew up with, what many of us grew up with, as the image of some sense of progressive Zionism. As I say, if you combine merits and labor, which really represent the labor Zionist tradition that governed Israel for the first 29 years of its existence, and that continued to be a factor in politics essentially through the end of the 20th century, but not really for the last generation. The 6.7% of the vote is what's left to the parties that descend from that. And the other parties in the anti-Netanyahu coalition range from being to the right of Netanyahu on a number of issues to other parties who are kind of more in the center. But the center of what exactly? And so the difficulty here is the rightward trend of Israeli politics in general. In fact, excuse me. Inhaling some of my mask here. The trend has been for the Haredim, who had been for a long period of time just sort of selling their vote to the highest bidder between the leading coalitions in order to get privileges for Haredi institutions, now going all in with the more nationalistic aspects of Israeli politics. The tendency historically for the immigrants from the former Soviet Union to also align themselves with the political right. The increase in the number of settlers and the increased association with the settler movement of larger parts of the Israeli population led to this transformation of Israeli politics, so that the real choices have realistically been quite limited. And the question of peace with the Palestinians has really been very much pushed to the back burner. This was not an issue really in the election at this point. And the idea of the Jewish nature of the state is something that is very much at issue in Israel, and the doubling down of the idea of a kind of Jewish exclusivity to the state, represented by Netanyahu and most especially by Ben-Gvir and some other elements, really come to dominate the issues, and so. There's a common thread with respect to what's going on in Israel and what's going on in many other parts of the world that I was talking with my students about this saying from the French nobleman La Rochefoucauld that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. And I never have appreciated hypocrisy so much as I have in recent years, as shamelessness has come to be taken as a kind of courage, and so we have a kind of overt denial of the dignity and humanity of people without distinction in societies, but rather very much a kind of parochial sense that perhaps we can't all be saved. And we should have regard for people who are sufficiently courageous in moral terms to sort of step up and demonstrate their ruthlessness, whether that be with respect to migrants and refugees trying to reach Europe from the Middle East and North Africa. We see throughout the European Union backlashes against immigration. If you follow the news about the United Kingdom recently, just an extraordinary level of hostility being manifested toward people who are seeking asylum in the UK. The effort to send people off to Rwanda to be held there, who are seeking asylum in Britain. The remarkable articulations of the Home Secretary in England speaking about Albanians arriving in England as an invasion. And so this is all sort of a piece of our politics these days. Of course, shamelessness has a face in the United States of Donald Trump in a way that's really quite remarkable. And the one thing that we can see in the set of election results in the U.S. Has been some sense that perhaps people are getting tired of this routine, that there's a level of shamelessness that perhaps is beyond what most people are willing to tolerate, that some of these figures who were most associated with shamelessness seem to have suffered setbacks in this election. And so perhaps there is more hope than we thought there was a week ago, that our politics can kind of recover a sense of humanity and civility and go forward on somewhat different terms than we have seen up to this point. But anyway, I wanted to open the floor to people on this sort of theme of how people are regarding what's happening here, what's happening in Israel, and so on. Yeah.
I just read recently a comment that majority rule is not the same as democracy, and I wonder if that's meaningful for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I write a lot about democracy and international law, and my main point about it is that you don't know what democracy is unless you know what it's for, and we don't actually agree on what it's for. And so the idea of there being this kind of global democratic standard is a kind of dangerous illusion, it seems to me, because the touchstones of political legitimacy are kind of obscured by the use of this rhetoric of democracy, which anyone could use. Historically, of course, the term democracy was sufficiently open-textured to allow for one-party regimes that tolerated no organized opposition. And we still see residue of that in names like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. But people, or Democratic Kampuchea, perhaps maybe the worst. But the idea of democracy is a much more complicated one than people typically can get their minds around. Partly, I mean, one way of illustrating the point, if you understand democracy in terms of political equality, then one person, one vote in various circumstances can lead to a situation in which 51% of the people have 100% of the power and 49% of the people have 0% of the power. And so that what I refer to as predatory democracy, or predatory majoritarianism. And it's not actually properly called democracy, I think, in any regard. And so the question is, how do we understand what Ronald Dworkin refers to as equal concern and respect as the ethos of politics to be manifested institutionally? What role do elections play vis-a-vis other kinds of institutions? What is the role of judicial review of legislation, for example? What is the role of various kinds of institutional checks that are created in various places to prevent predatory majoritarianism from taking hold? In some places this is institutionalized through what's known as consociationalism, where there's an understanding that the society is essentially an association of associations, and so you are creating an electoral system that is segmented, that provides for participation of all parts of the political community in decisions, and provides certain kinds of veto power for different groups to assert their vital interests. Where this is formalized most rigidly, it has tended to lead to deadlock and failure. Bosnia and Northern Ireland are two great examples of peace accords that were based on consociationalism, that have led to a failure of governance. Currently, as you may know, there's no government in Northern Ireland because the party that needs to be part of the government in Northern Ireland is boycotting it. And Bosnia is a situation where you have essentially an international trusteeship that continues there because the way that the power is subdivided within the Bosnian electoral system essentially means that decisions that need to be taken can't be taken. So this is the problem isn't necessarily the mechanism, but what requires the mechanism, which is to say the underlying divisions in society that make it impossible to say that it's a democratic decision of the political community just because 51% of the people happen to support it. And so we need to think about legitimacy in a more complex way than that. But of course that exposes all of the fundamental disagreements that we have about political norms. Yeah.
Do you think the two-state solution is dead in Israel?
Yes. And I say that with a heavy heart because I was part of the original movement toward this in the early 1980s. When I first arrived in Israel, I became acquainted with an organization called the Israeli Council for Israeli-Palestinian Peace, and shortly thereafter became an official and ultimately the vice chair of the America-Israel Council for Israeli-Palestinian Peace, which was the sort of American solidarity group for this. This was led in Israel by people like General Matityahu Peled, who had been the former military governor of the Gaza Strip, and also the newspaper editor Uri Avneri. These were key figures who had served in the Knesset, who boldly supported in the early 1980s the idea of dialogue with Palestinian national leadership and the creation of two states as a manifestation of the self-determination of the two peoples. The two-state solution, I think, was always rejected by the mainstream authorities in Israel until such time as it became manifestly unworkable based upon a whole series of Israeli policies over time to make the West Bank basically impossible to sort of unpack the settlements, now representing something like 600,000 Israelis living on the wrong side of the Green Line, who clearly aren't going anywhere. I think that this has been a calculated policy. Once it became impossible as a practical matter to have a truly viable Palestinian state, then leading figures in Israel started to say positive things about a two-state solution, but what they really meant was essentially not two equal entities who were in some way going to interact so as to give rise to some equitable solution and manifesting the self-determination of both peoples in the territory, but rather just a way for Israel to be able to sort of contract out the task of governance of part of the population that it did not want to absorb and certainly did not want to give the vote. So I think the two-state solution has been fetishized. It's become referred to, by many well-meaning people as though it were an end in itself, when in fact it was always intended not as an end in itself, but as a means to the dignity and equality of Palestinians in the territory, and I think that at this point, has been badly exposed. When I was, as I said, my first time in Israel Israel was 35 years old. The occupation was 16 years old. The last time I was back was 4 years ago, and Israel was now 70 years old, twice as old. And the occupation was 51 years old. And it really struck me that those percentages made a difference, that it was possible in the past to think of the occupation as a temporary expedient, that this was not part and parcel of the identity of the state of Israel. It was something separate and that would ultimately somehow be resolved through negotiations, so that the Israeli project would not be permanently tainted by the process of domination of another people. When you look at the history of Israel, most of the history of Israel now is a history of domination of the occupied territories. And even that doesn't really fully express the problem, because what happens in all of this is that the Palestinian people are fragmented conceptually, not just in sort of practical terms, but we now, there are diaspora Palestinians, there are Arab citizens of Israel, there are residents of East Jerusalem who are not citizens of Israel, there are residents of the West Bank, there are residents of the Gaza Strip, and you can even subdivide further, there's areas A, B, and C in the West Bank. This sort of fragmentation of Palestinians into these kind of conceptual categories makes it possible to perpetuate a domination on Israel's terms, and I think that this fails to give any prospect for the realization of Palestinian self-determination. And so I think that the fact that the two-state solution no longer has the kind of support in the Israeli polity, even in its most stripped-down form, is just kind of the nail in the coffin of an idea that has long since been kind of a promissory note that no one ever really intended to honor. And so.
So your topic is the elections in the U.S. and Israel, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how these elections might affect the future of each other, of how America and Israel under the current regimes might go forward.
Well, it's been interesting because the Republican Party has sort of taken on in this weird way. I mean, there's sort of on one hand all these manifestations of anti-Semitism within the Republican Party that are not necessarily inconsistent with the idea of cheerleading for the most militant anti-Palestinian forces in Israel. But that, of course, the Republican charge has been blunted, at least at this point here. Meanwhile, we get back Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been the most polarizing leader of Israel for the American polity that there's ever been. Someone who obviously took this very antagonistic position toward Barack Obama. And it will be interesting to see what the relationship is. But the Biden administration hasn't shown any particular interest in taking strong measures regarding the matter of Palestinian rights. There's just a vote in the UN General Assembly to call upon the International Court of Justice to issue an advisory opinion about the status of the occupied territories. The Biden administration supported Israel on that, along with very few other countries in the world. So that reference will go forward to the International Court of Justice, and it's quite predictable that the International Court of Justice will issue an advisory opinion highly condemnatory of Israel's governance in the occupied territories. So, one can, I think, for the foreseeable future, see the status quo in terms of the position of the United States, always trying to somehow portray itself as an honest broker, while at the same time saying that there's really no daylight between their position and the position of the government of Israel, and how you can hold those two positions simultaneously is never obvious, to say the least. So I don't see a lot of change coming in the near term. Yeah.
I think you answered this, but I just wanted to clarify that you feel that Israeli politicians waited until it was no longer practically viable to have a sovereign Palestinian state to support the two-state solution.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that that there were moments of hope in the course of all of this that something would change. But I think in general, and one of the big problems was simply the interest in waiting until the PLO was actually too weak to genuinely guarantee any kind of compliance on the Palestinian side, before actually engaging in the kinds of negotiations that need to be engaged in. In 1983, I could see at the time that not only was the situation, the way that the Israeli politicians throughout the sort of mainstream, that is to say, not Kahana on the far right and not my friends on the far left, but the basic position was one of wanting to sort of kick the can down the road, wanting to sort of maintain the status quo and not really fundamentally address these questions. This was unsustainable, and a lot of people understood that it was unsustainable, but no one wanted to actually address these questions. There were peace plans on the table in 1983 because the war in Lebanon had taken place in 1982. The only silver lining in that catastrophic adventure was that in some sense both sides lost the war. And that, a hurting stalemate is the way in which you end up getting peace accords. And there were possibilities for moving forward in that period. And there was a vibrant peace movement in Israel during that period that particularly became manifested after the Sabra and Shatila massacres in September of 1982, when huge numbers of people came out on the streets to protest against the Begin Sharon government. And just all that momentum ended up being lost. It wasn't until the early 1990s that there was any move toward any kind of accord. That was seen as having been somehow a brilliant stroke to wait until the Palestinians were weaker and then impose really Israel's terms on the Palestinians. But the problem with that was that it had the seeds of its own destruction. That there was no possibility that Palestinians were going to ultimately accept the kinds of terms that Israel was going to want to impose in these circumstances. And so you had this period between 93 and with the handshake and 2000, 2001, where the less serious negotiations occurred. But I think after that, there's been really no prospect of Israeli kind of forthcomingness with respect to the kinds of things that would be the minimum requirements for Palestinian engagement.
I know people have more questions, and I'm going to suggest that maybe while we're doing Kiddush after the service, people can continue to carry on the conversation. But thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. And now we'll put the Torah away.
Please rise as you are able.
Page 433.
Thank you so much. Sorry. 433. 433. Excellent. And I apologize, I was so excited to hear Brad, I forgot we were going to put the Torah away first before Brad talks. So I'm off the outline, but we got this. Okay, we are continuing on page 433. Yahallelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, oto haaretz she'shamayim, v'yarem kerem le'omo, tihalel ha'asiyah, continue. Sorry. On page 441, halfway down the page. It's You may be seated.
We'll continue with the Misha Barak, and so I'm going to ask people to mention that the Misha Barak should be in your book. There should be a little piece of paper, either on page 684 or at the back of your siddur, with the song on it. So let us remember people who are in need of healing. Any names people would like to add?
Marcia Sakwa. Liat Faz Elaine, and also that entire family who has COVID right now. Like, her entire family is down for the count at the moment. So, like, her and her family.
Sandy Schwartz, Lisa Steinman, Jim Berman, and Glenn Weisfeld.
Mark Renner.
Elaine Viloff, Willow Silverman.
Judy Weidenmore.
Betty Shank. Misha
source of strength, who was the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach, Nihotenu, Mekor HaBrachah, Avotenu, bless us in need of healing, with Ruach Shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
There's a special reading on page 772. We read that as members of the congregation, please. We cannot merely pray to God to end war, for the world was made in such a way that we must find our own path of peace within ourselves and with our neighbor.
We cannot really pray to God without prejudice, or regarding the eyes with which to see good and all
We cannot merely pray to God to end starvation, for we already have the resources with which to feed the entire world if we would only use them wisely.
We cannot merely pray to God to end despair, for we already have the power to clear away slums and to give hope, if we would only use our power justly.
We cannot merely pray to God to end disease, for we already have great minds with which to search out cures and healings if we would only use them constructively.
Therefore we pray instead for strength, determination, and willpower, to do instead of merely to pray,
to become instead of merely to wish, that our world may be safe and that our lives may be blessed.
And let's stand for the Elaine on page 445.
The mourner's Kaddish is on page 451.
I know Rabbi Ariana has the list from the
We continue to mourn the losses in the past 11 months of Eugene Dreiker, Bernard Hellman, Sam Glass, Maxine Gutfreund, David Schoen, Lois Fishman, the Honorable Avon Cohn, Gerald Levine, Matt Fishman, and Gerald Last. We commemorate the art sites this week of Louis Albert, Morris Mintz, Shirley Agri, Martha Herman Seidenworth, Hilda Marks, Alexander Isaac Agri, who by the way is the Isaac Agri of the Isaac Agri Downtown Synagogue, Harry Myers, Malvina Freed, and Celia Zadig.
Others that we're remembering today?
Selma Roth. J.J. Gordon.
Anybody is writing the anniversary? Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbo. Yamod divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechonu v'yamekonu v'chayi v'chol beit Yisrael. V'agdala v'zman kori v'imru amen. Yeh shmei Rabbo barach v'yolam v'yamem. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yifahar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei v'kudashah v'reihu. Le'ela min kol berachata v'shirata, tushakata v'nechemata, dameram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Moseh shalom b'imrama, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Now, are there announcements? Announcements?
Yes!
Always announcements.
There's always announcements. The first weekend in December, I'm pretty sure it's December 2nd, that Friday night, we are having a Shabbat dinner and service in partnership with Chazon. They're doing their program called Shodmei Adamah. which talks about climate destabilization and what we can do to address it. We are going to have a babysitter so that if you wish to bring children, you can do that, and you're even going to engage in an environmental activity. So please check out our website or newsletter, or let me know if you're interested in attending the dinner. And as it will be here. It'll be upstairs in Ledger. And as I asked last week, if you can let me know whether you're planning to be in town or out of town, Thanksgiving weekend, Christmas weekend, and New Year's weekend, we'll make sure that everybody is accommodated for worship services. Yes, Phil.
Next Monday night, a week from this Monday, the Shalom Hartman Institute is sponsoring Yossi Klein Halevi, who will be speaking at Temple Israel, starting at 6:45 p.m. And his topic is what Israel's election tells us about the state of the state at 75. And it is free, and you can register at shalomhartman.org/Israel75 Detroit. Or you can also go to the JCRC AJC website, and we can give you a link for that.
Okay, and I would like to make a brief, this isn't an announcement, as much as a note for people who are guests today who haven't been here before. We are in the RCD sanctuary space. The downtown synagogue space on Griswold is currently undergoing massive renovation, as you know. So the two congregations, as we collaborate, are meeting in this wonderful facility that in Christ Church. But we have lived here in this space and beneath the church for, I don't know, we've been here for 15 years or something like that. And what you see is the good, the bad, and the ugly. The bad was the flood we had about a year ago in this whole part of Christ Church. It flooded out their classrooms, their whole education center, damaged our historic window, which is on its side behind a caution tape now. Ordinarily it would be in this space and it would be backlit so that you could appreciate the stained glass, which came from Germany to be in Mogain Avraham behind the DIA in 1926, I believe.
I never knew that.
Farnsworth Shoal.
The Farnsworth Shoal, yeah, and actually the historic pieces of the window were saved by the late Senator Carl Levin, who was a member of our congregation, and then reformed into a new frame and new pieces of glass. And so that is our beloved window. Our beloved ark is from the UP. So we have a lot of very beautiful things here, some of which were damaged in the flood, and now the floor is the ugly part because the water was over here. But you will also, as we enjoy Kiddush in a minute or so, please take a look at the artwork, much of which is by another one of our members, Susan Gold, who retired from University of Windsor's art department a few years ago, but still contributes some of her artwork every so often, and some other interesting pieces as well. And feel free to ask our in-house historian, Harriet, right there, or any of us if you have questions about items here. So we'll finish with...
That's a new name for me. I'll have to remember. In-house historian.
Adon Olam is on page 459. Adon Olam Hashem Malach V'terem kol Yitzir Nivra V'yednaso V'yednaso L'zmai Melech Shemo Nivra V'yachaveh Kiklotako V'lado Yimlok Nora V'hu Hayah V'hu Omed V'hu Yiyeh please, everyone, join us for Kiddush. We'll have blessings and then some light snacks.
Yasher Koach. I learned a lot.
So you see the proposal for the Bachelor of Arts in Law?
Yeah, and did you see Justin's?
I did, yeah.
Oh, good.
That's not gonna garner much support.
Oh, absolutely.
I favor increasing
So what do we
You were really serious about it.
Alex, I remember everything you told me. I remember when you told me that you were ready for Orthodox.
I'm afraid of getting up to
And you have been done. I remember one who was right to it. I couldn't remember your name, so I'm sorry. I'm just horrible at names. Sorry? Oh, you don't know about it now. They sing along anyway. Oh, it's nice to have you here.
Rob will be there to say that.
Yes, and I will probably send a message to everyone.
Would anybody like some salted caramel whiskey?
This is great news for the College of the Lord.
nursing students said Detroit Nursing? Yes, ma'am. I went to 2 years ago from the psychology department. I used to teach you guys.
Ooh, it's kind of exciting.
Developmental psychology. Yeah.
I have to take that this upcoming semester, so I'll take it and think, oh.
Yeah, I really miss teaching the nursing students. It was so much, so enjoyable. Such good, serious students.
Thank you so much for having us, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it was a pleasure to have you. Want me to take your prayer books? Oh,
Just put them on the
stick them in the box?
Just leave the little ones
Thank
on
you
the
so much
bench and
for
we'll collect them
everything.
after.
Oh, sure.
In fact, you can, okay, this one will go into a box. The little ones go on the bench. You know what, put them all on the bench and we'll take care of them afterward. It's easier. This is grape juice, there is lime.
Did you visit for this? Yeah.
We're taking.
Carol, you want grape
Thank you.
juice?
Everybody got their drink of choice.
We're taking study of
This is
religion,
grape juice.
and we were given the opportunity to attend a site visit.
Rabbi, take it away.
Okay, if you have a grape juice or wine, you will say Borei Pri Hagafen. If you only have the whiskey, then you say She'akol Mihiyah Bifaro. Phil, would you like to lead us in the blessing?
Sure. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'paro. L'chaim, everybody. That's good.
So who teaches that?
What's the verdict?
From psychology. Such a good guy. Yeah. I love your part. Sure. Okay, make it part of your report.
My
You
hands.
got a fresh one. There's a bunch more on the
My hands were
table.
so sweaty. I was like holding it.
Yeah, but you can like turn it in with your writing report for him.
Yeah, I believe we're writing 4 pages.
Yeah. And now everybody's taking a piece of the challah, the bread.
Oh, are we also meant to?
Yeah, oh yeah. Please take a piece of that.
Thank you.
And then Sheila's behind you. She needs a piece too, I think. I don't know if any of you are Catholic or Episcopalian. but this is so reminiscent of the wine and the bread and the same tradition. It's just a continuity of what the community comes together to share.
What is this called?
This is called Challah. Yeah, it's C-H-A-L-E. Yeah, but you don't pronounce the C. It's actually a in Arabic and Jewish.
And that's what the dots were on some of the words. Under some of the words, some of the syllables had a little dot. And then whenever someone said it, was like with the sound, and I was like, oh.
The H. If there's that little circle under it is correct.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
I'm just curious what the reasoning is behind the Reconstructionist tradition of only reading, of only doing 3 aliyot. Just curious.
It's become the tradition because there's usually a sense that the community wants to come together to discuss things.
Okay.
And they're usually things that have to do with some social issue or some issue that's of urgency.
So it's time allocation.
Yeah, it is
Okay.
pretty much time allocation.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, some Reconstructionist groups will do 8 aliyah, but generally we do 3. And then we reserve time for some kind of a discussion. There's a lot of communal decision making too. That is sort of a grounds bottom up decision making. Like for example, questions of at a bar bat mitzvah, how many, if it's a mixed faith family, how many people who are not Jewish would be able to come up to the bima and, take an aliyah. Is it okay if somebody who's not Jewish have an aliyah? And that's the kind of decision that would be made at the community level, so that everybody would have buy-in into it.
Does the Talmud say anything about that?
Pardon?
Does the Talmud say anything about non-Jews doing
Oh yeah, there'd always be somebody in the discussion who would say, well, the Talmud says, this book of the Talmud says this book says this.
There's conflicting opinions.
And that's what Judaism is all about, right? Discussing these conflicting opinions, but in terms of modern day decisions. There's so many mixed faith families that there are lots of issues that have to be decided so that the community is comfortable. But yeah, that's generally what most Reconstructionist groups will do. And there's more English than the usual downtown synagogue service. There's way more Hebrew in that.
Well, I can understand the reasoning for that being that most people here understand English to a greater degree than Hebrew.
Absolutely.
A much greater degree for me.
Yeah. And so it makes people feel like they're more connected.
No, that's okay, thanks for explaining. Well, thanks for leading the service. Great.
Oh, you're welcome. Pleasure. We take turns leading because we don't have a rabbi. So we all sort of have to learn how to do things, and my Hebrew's not great, Brad's isn't great, but Alan's is great, so we can kind of allocate responsibilities based on what people bring to the table. And thank you so much for reading for me today. Bye. Good to see you.
My best to Glenn.
Thank you. He'll appreciate that, Phil. And we're also sorry about the pack.
Tell him, don't watch the game tomorrow. It'll be better for his health.
I'll tell him you said that. All right.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Don't eat the clock.
You? Yeah. I'm doing alright. Sabbatical next semester, so I have to go until December 1st. So the last will be end of August.
Yes, for sure.
It's
a small Jewish family.
Are you taking any time to get away?
We were here for Rosh
Oh, terrific.
First and still best friend is being installed as president of Reform in Jerusalem. And I believe I have convinced her that she might be able to see that would be
Did the kids make friends while you were there?
They did. We had them in a camp there was an Anglophone culture, so they had mostly on the reference. So they made friends with their but you might be able to take them to a lot places that we
No.
You know, have this mitral valve.
I was under but she was just starting the first day of school. She's also the rabbi of Maine.
This is
Oh, so I've been resting. But after that, I don't know yet. What would you recommend?
Congregation first and foremost, and then maybe you can't get a real job. As Jewish people, we don't need this. We do need the rabbis. I grew up maybe back then. Medical practice.
I was just about to say, that was it. 1994, 1995, cable news.
I think there is growth in sort of activist groups or still doing well. So there are those kinds of other voices
For the other guy.
For sure. Nothing at all helps. I'm with it. And that's
interesting, that the question that we posed,
And it was okay, as long as the Ottoman Empire and Muslim, Islam, we were fine.
More or less, yeah. More or less okay.
Okay, yes.
It didn't.
I thought we did.
It didn't
Yeah,
slow down.
I think it's generally, I think there's,
Israel and Jerusalem.
generally,
This was collected also by two of our members.
Yeah.
The fact that we
This
discharged
is by a woman in
Maybe not
Buffalo, and
house.
this is in New Jersey. And this is by Susan Goldsmith.
we were talking about
That's sort
cultural.
of where how I see it.
To try to outlaw these
Right.
people, people that need to.
And I think the other thing is providing alternatives. I think that we have to provide.
You know, I was reading the obituary this week of and Frank Carroll.
Give everyone.
And what struck me was one person
That we should have reusable water cards.
He does a lot of that stuff.
her children, her grandchildren.
Right. And I think the rabbis also value has gone
Every library in Michigan.
there are a series of things. I can't imagine your We'll provide more alternatives. We'll provide more alternatives as part of it. Maybe we could get a water. Encouraging more free
The old one, which was in Lafayette Park.
So we're going
Lafayette Park in Paradise Valley is what you said. My mother Paradise Valley with major black.
It was a lovely time.
Not understanding that this many people who've been every part of it couldn't get rid of it. But we did on the streets and they were working at night. But whatever it was, basically our country was trying to do.
We have a fridge. We have a fridge. We have
My hummus. Storage for hummus. It's big hummus. And I also put
Literally, every house on their street, Lafayette Street, you know, all the way from Gratiot, we got Gratiot going. She was temporary.
We're building a spot.
So they ended up putting together. And it's find a slum. Well, they weren't in good shape. They still had wooden types of.
We started
But it turns
fairly early in the semester.
and basically, it was kicked out. And then nobody would build on it because we were busily building like a whole park, so it's Southfield and wow, there were no nights yet.
You were hosting. Your name was
Basically, it stayed empty until the developer, this has to do with synagogues, I like to say.
Thanks for being a part of it.
A developer in Detroit, Harold Green, a developer in Chicago, he did it for Chicago, the Marine Towers and a lot of other stuff. It doesn't matter. He loved Mies van der Rohe, who was then in the University of
I don't know the others.
Don't buy houses. Young doctors don't buy houses. Okay, interns, nurses. You know, it's the way you can do it. It's not, so you have the combination and there's all this growing in the all around Southfield and so stayed empty. It's a co-op. And part of it, the first facility that went up was the pavilion apartment.
I also believe that
First flood was later on the
I don't accept the idea of political community.
But it's only Elmwood 1, 2, or 3.
But it's difficult when science is collapsed into what I refer to.
And it's always
Existing
No, I moved here in 64. I was pregnant and I had a 2 years.
My kids are right now.
But the whole area has yes, but I'm not sure it's where Alan and just where he lives.
How are your kids?
Broad Street, south of
Moving one direct weekend with us, with me.
So this whole area,
saving.
Alright, he's still here, like, I remember having crazy conversations with you on drum beach about how you needed to have peace and I wasn't voting for him.
But in fact, I'm in some ways not any more depressed by that than I am by the fact that the alternative with other believers
one of my former
That's nice. Did they have to postpone it? Is that capacity? Like, I think Rachel reading the other day that he was just like, I'm out.
No,
Like, I really oh, that's certainly a long time.
Can you mean half?
The only place they're not is Detroit, because she grew up in Detroit.
I've always thought that labor's out.
Do they live in Philadelphia? Oh, do they live in Philadelphia?
With the problem. The realities of represent the occasion in order to reconcile that reality with the ideology. When I was in college, I took the sports university from outside lived on a settlement, took us towards the settlement.
And did Harriet fly or drive?
Stunning thing about
my other daughter came up by train.
rendering what I have done.
And Rena lived in New York.
There was one.
came up, some city, mega city, or something. Oh, that's terrific.
Copy the Jewish News article ready for
Yeah.
All I know is
I've heard it twice already.
it's frustrating to see when the labor scientists, not to make one who wants the mass
Evidently.
perceptible.
I wouldn't have known that.
When people are willing to say, I did it because I could, $5 by
It's not because there was an option at the time, but now you can do something.
So.
Nice to meet you too.
And
I used to be really and we had a government that seemed like they might be okay, but now they're gone. And I feel like a lot of it, like I remember the day my parents sobbing because they were kind of knew that his death was the death of it all. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, we can still have hope. And they were like, no, there's another reconstruction. And I didn't believe that. And now looking back in hindsight, I'm like, y'all, you were right. And I'm really sad about you.
I didn't like him when he was alive, but I have a lot more regard for him in the meantime, just because
somewhere on the computer, where we find out. This is
Northern Irish, having more of the Guinness in the itself really
It was a great New York Detroit news story.
In the scheme of things, he was by virtue of having demonstrated how far he was willing to go. He had credibility, and he was told that, they were not going to be making a peace with the later form.
So what are you using in the meantime?
There's never really been with leadership. Perez was never quite to it in some way. And the law is the same.
You mean Obama?
No.
I was about to say, like,
No.
How did that happen?
No.
Yeah, I remember him now.
Yes.
I hear Rocket Lake. I see him go to our president.
Yeah, we had his moment from 99 to 2001. And what he did which made it inevitable that these were
like a comfortable bed.
Oh, right.
Basis for saying,
You would have to be packing.
What are we going to see?
When you talk to I also, I hear this stuff from the other side, the new generation.
And Kim Berger get awards for their we have 3 or 4 So you have to be. So you have to slip well.
Yes. Okay,
and I just saw that,
Which are correct in some anyway, but which fail to recognize why it is. People remain
Control of the Senate can come down to in Nevada right now. There's still more ballots that they have to count, but the number as it stands, he's up by 160. like in the city. Yeah, and they're anticipating more votes from Clark County. So that's how these people it works. You know, they think that it'll be substantial.
Threatening children to firm.
But the difference is,
I was kind of hoping, like, these are the things we'd be hoping for, and I also knew that that probably wasn't gonna happen.
so many things.
But at least our government.
Yeah.
Maybe
there will be
But they're electrical.
Okay.
Well, dodgeable, even if two major parties and one minor party. Two major parties are the Democrats and Trumpists that try to make the party accredited themselves by conservative
Seems like they're shooting And I read this morning that if we lose the House, it will be by such a margin.
As the Senate, we may actually, and it's even conceivable we'll end up with 51 in the Senate because the numbers in Nevada are moving in the right direction. And all we need is for Trump to make an appearance in Georgia that we're not.
delicious.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Justin made hummus this afternoon.
And tell me your name.
Justin made the hummus himself. Without tahini. Yeah.
So good to see you. I hope things improve. They will. I mean, don't say it over it, come on.
Yes. Nicole.
Okay, now we have to figure out.
So Brad, what the hell happened to labor? Good. I mean, in Britain, in Israel,
Just as a.
here,
What you would call it.
in France, in Sweden.
Culturally.
Good.
It's under pressure from different directions, and especially, the problem, I mean, you identify the word labor, which is a kind of common denominator. When you think about labor markets, you think about the relationship between labor markets and immigration, and the relationship between immigration and nativism, and the one Democratic Party that did well in national elections was the Danish Social Democrats.
The Danish did all right?
Yeah, and that's because they moved way to the right on immigration.
I have an old British friend who lives in the south of England. And he and his family are long, generations of labor, and he's left labor.
They do
what?
Nothing. Here's my story of the old-fashioned Englishman. He finished school at 14 or so.
So what do you
He
think
lived
of
on a
bakers?
law, he and his family lived on a law's estate.
Are they all
The
gone?
Lord would drive by and they were.
You ate one?
They had all that.
Just, we
And,